The knock came at 6:12 in the morning. Not loud, not aggressive, just calm enough to make Martin Lewis think it was hotel staff. He opened the door, half awake, in boxer shorts and a wrinkled t-shirt, expecting housekeeping, or maybe Darika returning with breakfast from the street market below. Instead, 6 police officers pushed into the room. No explanation, no warning, no warrant. One of them grabbed his phone before he could even lock the screen. Another officer walked straight toward the table where the cash withdrawal receipts were still sitting beside 2 unfinished coffees. And that was the moment Martin realised something was wrong. Very wrong, because those receipts were the same receipts he believed proved he had saved her. Now the police were photographing them like evidence from a crime scene. 3 weeks earlier, Martin had met Darika inside a nightclub just off Walking Street. At first, nothing about the interaction felt unusual. She laughed at his bad jokes. She spoke decent English. She never immediately asked for money. That part mattered to him later, because when everything collapsed, Martin replayed every conversation over and over, searching for the moment he missed the setup. Darika was 26, quiet compared to the other women in the club. She told him she was from a farming village in northern Thailand and had started working in nightlife after her father got sick and her younger brother dropped out of school. Martin didn't fully believe everything, but he believed enough. And over several nights, something shifted. She stopped behaving like someone working a customer. At least that's how it felt to him. She talked about leaving the industry constantly. She said she hated the drinking, hated pretending to like tourists, hated paying fees every week just to avoid trouble with management. At first, Martin thought she was exaggerating. Then one night she cried in the taxi back to his hotel. Not dramatically, the kind people try hard to hide. That destroyed him emotionally, because Martin had recently gone through a divorce himself, and somewhere deep down he needed to feel useful again, needed to feel like he could still protect someone, and Darika figured that out before he did. The idea of buying her freedom didn't happen immediately. Martin resisted it at first, even laughed nervously the first time she mentioned exit fees. "What is this? The mafia?" he joked. But Darika didn't laugh. She explained the bar claimed she owed money for accommodation, advances, uniforms, customer fines, and penalties for missed shifts. The number kept changing. First it was £3,000, then £6,000, then suddenly almost £10,000. Every time Martin hesitated, something happened. Darika showed up with bruises on her arm, or disappeared for 2 days, or sent voice notes crying at 3 a.m. saying she was scared. Looking back, Martin admits the pressure worked because he wanted the fantasy to be true, not the romance, the rescue. That was the addiction, the belief that one large sacrifice could completely change another human being's life. So he agreed. But even then, things weren't smooth. The bank blocked his international transfer twice. His brother back home begged him not to do it. One bartender quietly warned him, "You pay once, they never leave you alone." Martin almost backed out. Almost. But Darika panicked when he hesitated. Said the bar manager was threatening her. Said she could disappear. said this was his last chance to help her escape, and eventually emotion beat logic. The payment happened in an office above the club. Martin expected paperwork, some official process. Instead, it felt like a backroom gambling deal. A fan rattled overhead. 2 men counted cash 3 separate times. Nobody explained anything clearly. One manager kept smiling while recording parts of the transaction on his phone. That should have been the final warning. But Martin interpreted it differently. He thought they wanted proof she had been released voluntarily. He even asked Darika multiple times, "Are you sure this means you're free now?" She nodded every single time. Afterward, she hugged him outside the club and cried into his chest while traffic roared behind them. Martin genuinely believed the nightmare was over, until the knock came 8 hours later. Back in the hotel room, officers separated Martin and Darika immediately. He kept trying to explain. She asked for help. I paid the bar. She wanted to leave. But every sentence seemed to make things worse, because the investigators weren't hearing rescue. They were hearing, I paid money for a woman. And under local anti-trafficking laws, that changed everything. The police showed him screenshots of transfers, photos from the nightclub, security footage, even taxi records. One investigator leaned forward and asked, "So how much did you pay to own her?" Martin felt physically sick hearing the question. He tried explaining again. Darika was free to leave. She wasn't forced. I never controlled her. But the narrative had already hardened. And once that happened, facts stopped mattering. The first lawyer seemed helpful, too helpful. He arrived within hours, spoke perfect English, promised he could make everything disappear. For a price, a massive price. Martin was terrified enough to agree initially, but details from conversations somehow reached investigators, and accusations started escalating almost immediately. Court dates appeared out of nowhere. At one point, the lawyer even suggested paying an administrative settlement fee directly to officials to reduce the risk of going to prison. That's when Martin realised something horrifying. The legal system wasn't functioning like justice. It was functioning like a marketplace, and he was the product being sold. At first, Darika defended him. She told police he was helping her voluntarily, but pressure built fast. Her family started receiving visits. Officers warned her that she could also face charges. Then suddenly, her story became inconsistent. Small changes at first, then larger ones. By the third statement, investigators were calling Martin a buyer, not a rescuer. He remembers seeing her in court after that. She wouldn't look him in the eyes, and for the first time, Martin wondered if any of it had ever been real. That question destroyed him mentally, more than the thought of prison, because prison was concrete, understandable, but emotional betrayal, that thing mutates inside your head. Within 3 months, Martin had burned through nearly everything. Legal retainers, translation fees, processing costs. Every single person seemed to need money urgently, and every payment brought less progress. Not more, less. Friends back home stopped answering calls because the story sounded insane. Even his own mother asked, "Are you sure you didn't do something illegal?" That question crushed him, because Martin wasn't even sure how to explain the truth anymore. How do you explain good intentions when every piece of evidence looks criminal. The worst part wasn't jail. Not yet. The worst part was waiting. Every day felt poisoned. He couldn't leave the country, couldn't work properly, couldn't sleep. Every unknown call triggered panic. Every passing motorcycle made him look through the curtains. And slowly, paranoia started replacing reality. He stopped trusting lawyers, stopped trusting police, stopped trusting himself. Sometimes he even reread messages from Darika, trying to prove to himself she cared at least a little. But then he'd noticed details he ignored before. The timing, the repeated emergencies, the emotional pressure whenever money entered the conversation, and his stomach would drop all over again. 6 weeks before trial, Martin received one final offer through intermediaries. Pay a £20,000 unofficial settlement. The charges disappear. No prison, no media, no further investigation. Everyone walks away. His lawyer called it the practical solution. But Martin hesitated because by then he understood the real trap. If he paid once more, it would never end. There would always be another fee, another threat, another demand. So for the first time since meeting Darika, Martin refused. Not confidently, not heroically, he was terrified. Martin Lewis still doesn't fully know whether he was manipulated or whether Darika was trapped in something bigger than both of them. Maybe both are true. That's what makes stories like this dangerous. Not everything is completely fake, and not everything is completely real. Sometimes people are victims and participants at the same time, and sometimes the person trying hardest to be the hero becomes the easiest person to destroy. The trial is still approaching. A hefty prison sentence is still possible, and the man who thought he was buying someone's freedom is now fighting for his own. If this story affected you, share your thoughts and leave a comment below. And if you've ever experienced manipulation, betrayal, corruption, or a situation that spiraled completely out of control while travelling abroad, you can send it in completely anonymously. A lot of people may need those warnings more than they realise. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.